Muammar Mohammed Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi, aka Gaddafi, was born in the year of 1942 in Qasr Abu Hadi, Italian Libya. His family were Arab itinerant Bedouin farmers and members of the Gaddafi tribe. This means that they were nomads, herding livestock such as goats, sheep, and camels long distances, moving their animals to seasonally ideal locations at specific times throughout the year. Although he was loved, Gaddafi had a disadvantaged and challenging upbringing as his family were very poor. He was raised humble, to be tough and hardworking. From a young age, Gaddafi witnessed and experienced the extreme division and a lack of equality of the people within Libya and Africa at large. He also saw how first world nations were taking advantage of Africa's resources and influencing his people's way of life. He dreamed of change, a revolution that would free his people from the rules and confines implemented by an elite few. Gaddafi yearned to provide social justice, wealth, more opportunities, and an overall higher quality of life for the people of Libya and, furthermore, the entire continent of Africa. Growing up, Gaddafi looked up to and was inspired by many powerful political leaders. However, the most influential person by far was Gamal Abdel Nasser Hussein. Gamal Abdel Nasser Hussein was an Arab nationalist, an Egyptian military officer, and a politician who became the second president of Egypt from 1954 until his death in 1970. Hussein spearheaded the revolution of Egypt in 1952, prior to becoming president. This was what inspired Gaddafi the most. While attending school in Saba, Gaddafi became an Arab nationalist, enrolling in the Royal Military Academy of Benghazi. Here he worked with other like-minded individuals to create the Free Unionist Officers movement. At this time, the people of Libya were growing restless and were beginning to turn against the monarchy. The Free Officers movement was a combined group of both Arab nationalist and Nasserist officers from the Libyan army. This group of 70 army officers, led by Gaddafi, went on to orchestrate and execute the 1969 Libyan coup d'etat, which then overthrew the Senussi monarchy of King Idris I. King Idris was very unpopular amongst his people. He was placed into power by the United Nations General Assembly shortly after World War II, when Libya gained its independence. He was despised and viewed by many as a self-serving and corrupt man who bowed down to serve the West and the British colonial economic and military interests, while his own people struggled. He had banned political parties, making himself the sole ruler of Libya. He also allowed the United Kingdom and the United States to open military bases in the country, which Gaddafi later shut down. Needless to say, King Idris's days were numbered from the moment he was put into power. Once the coup had overrun King Idris and the monarchy and taken control of Libya, Gaddafi was anointed the commander-in-chief of the Libyan armed forces and then entered into a powerful position as the revolutionary chairman of the Libyan Arab Republic from 1969 to 1977. But this was only the beginning. In 1977, Gaddafi then assumed his role as the brotherly leader of the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya. Jamahiriya translates to State of the Masses. The Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya was at first committed to Arab nationalism and Nasserism, but later transformed into something truly unique, following the ideologies that were inspired by Gaddafi's own work, as presented within the Third International Theory. The Third International Theory was also known as the Third Universal Theory, or Gaddafism. It was a little green book written by Gaddafi himself, detailing a new way of governance and social structures that was inspired by Pan-Arabism, Arab nationalism, anti-imperialism, Nasserism, Islamic socialism, and direct democracy. The theories within this book challenged the way that society had been run, with the central focus being placing power, opportunities, and wealth back into the hands of the people. Gaddafi wanted to unite his people and promote self-governance by turning away from all control and dependence that the Arab nations previously had on the Western world, and he was not alone in his vision. While in power, Gaddafi collaborated with powerful political leaders. For example, he earned the respect and support of Nelson Mandela, particularly for his work to uplift and empower communities of colored people, both inside and outside of South Africa. Gaddafi earned the admiration of his people through his actions, not his words. He did exactly what he said he would do, contrary to the empty promises and the lip service that many of Libya's politicians and people in power had done up until then. Needless to say, Gaddafi's actions placed a massive target on his back by the global elite cabal, as well as every puppet working under them. Let us take a closer look at what Gaddafi did while in power that caused him to be so greatly despised and feared by the global elite, later leading to his demise.
Wouldn't be sorry to see Gaddafi fall, would you?
Well, I would think that diplomacy would have me not answer that question.
Approximately 95% of Libya's land area is comprised of dry and harsh terrain and uninhabitable desert. However, Gaddafi had grand plans of changing this. Over 25 years, Gaddafi carried out the world's largest irrigation system project. It was called the Great Man-Made River Project, or GMMRP.
Welcome to the Great Man-Made River in Libya. It's been under construction since 1985, but upon completion, it will provide water to over 35,000 acres of agricultural land, making it the world's largest irrigation project. Additionally, it will improve access to safe drinking water in Libya's cities, which will help millions of citizens and farmers with their crops. Although the exact amount spent on the project is unclear, the budget estimate was $20 to $25 billion.
He hired experts to locate ancient buried water basins in the Sahara Desert and then mine the fossil water that had been preserved in the large pockets of Nubian sandstone aquifer, which is a pumice-like stone. The Nubian sandstone aquifer is huge, running under Egypt, Chad, Sudan, and Libya. Some of the basins contained within the Nubian sandstone aquifer are buried up to 2,000 feet below the surface and hold approximately 480 cubic miles of fresh water. Gaddafi built 5 massive water reservoirs to hold the precious water as it was pumped from the underground aquifer. Because of this, under Gaddafi's rule, Libya began turning vast sandy deserts into abundant green strips that were fully functional and viable growing spaces. These areas were flourishing with fresh produce such as grapes, almonds, and pears, changing its topography and turning the sand into soil. Under the Gaddafi regime, farmers were supported like never before. Agriculture received the largest share of aid from the Gaddafi government in an effort to make Libya autonomous in food production and to encourage the rural population to continue growing food and working on the land. Farmers were assisted greatly, receiving free seeds, livestock, and household appliances. The government also subsidized new farmers for land purchased for farming to help get them started. Gaddafi established different people-led governing bodies to give the citizens of Libya a voice, allowing them to participate in major decisions that affected the public. In 1977, not long after Gaddafi entered into power, he formed the General People's Congress. The General People's Congress was the main legislative authority of the Libyan Arab Jamahiriya. It was similar to a traditional parliament. However, the representatives had no fixed terms and only met a few times a year, except in the case of an emergency session. These representatives were referred to as secretaries or delegates and were a combination of administrators of the Basic People's Congresses, Basic People's Committees, as well as worker federations, syndicates, and professional associations. There were over 2,700 delegates in the Congress, making it the second largest legislature in the world at the time. Gaddafi also formed the General People's Committee, or the GPCO. The GPCO was the intermediary between the people of Libya and the government's leaders. It was the executive branch of the government of Libya. The GPCO, similarly to the General People's Congress, consisted of regular Libyan people who volunteered and were elected in by the parliament and the General People's Congress. This group were to act as a cabinet, voting on important decisions for the country and its policies, operating like that of a republic or democracy. Gaddafi was a huge believer in Pan-Arabism, which was a vision where all Arab countries would band together united as one, to break away from the Western world order control and influences. In 2009, while Gaddafi was the president of the African Union, he made a bold proposal, calling on all the states of the African continent to make the switch to a new currency that would be backed by gold and independent of the American dollar. This currency was called the gold dinar. The gold dinar was a genius concept that would shut out the US dollar for all oil transactions, diverting oil revenues towards state-controlled funds instead of the cabal-owned American banks. Many countries, including Nigeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Angola, were on board and ready to adopt the gold dinar as their new currency. Although there are some notable differences, we can see some similarities of Gaddafi's concepts that are being adopted and implemented when we take a look at what the BRICS nations are working to achieve. Currently, BRICS are setting the stage in preparation to introduce their new gold-backed currency. This will enable them to trade freely amongst each other, using gold and assets to back the value of their currency, and they will no longer need to worry about tariffs and sanctions imposed by the US or other Western countries. Libya has a massive stockpile of natural resources, including oil, boasting the largest oil reserves in Africa, with approximately 48 billion barrels. Under Gaddafi's rule, the Libyan government announced the nationalization of a controlling interest in all other petroleum companies operating in the country. This move gave Libya control of about 70% of its domestic oil production by 1974. Money earned from oil exports was funneled back into infrastructure, education, water accessibility, agriculture, and healthcare. During Gaddafi's time in power, the price of petrol also became very affordable for Libyan citizens at 14 cents per liter, filling a whole tank for around $5. Under Gaddafi, the Libyan state was able to secure hundreds of tons of gold and the same amount in silver, as well as over $150 billion in reserves, and owed no external debt. All of these resources were going to make Libya the most wealthy and influential country in Africa. The citizens of Libya reaped the benefits of free electricity and water, which was an incredibly precious resource, especially in that part of the world. Healthcare may not have been ideal in Libya under Gaddafi's rule. However, it was made free and accessible for all citizens, and if the medical treatment that a person required were not available, the government would fund them to travel abroad, even paying up to $2,300 for accommodation per month. There were no interest rates charged on loans, and all banks were state-owned. Under Gaddafi, the income per capita rose to more than $11,000 in nominal terms, and to over $30,000 in PPP terms, making Libya's income the 5th highest in Africa. There were, and still are, no income taxes except on government personnel and businesses. Education was a top priority for Gaddafi and his policies, and the statistics represent this. Libya's citizens enjoyed unparalleled, free access to education, and the literacy rate increased from 25% to 83% while Gaddafi was in power. Over 25% of Libyans had a university degree, and if a postgraduate student was unable to find work in their field after graduating from their study, the Libyan government would pay them the average wage for that profession until employment was secured. Unfortunately, education was centralized in Libya under Gaddafi's rule, and it did become compulsory for all children to attend school. However, Gaddafi understood that children were the future. Therefore, he wanted the children of Libya to be on par with the Western world in terms of their education, and the statistics proved that his methods were working. Under Gaddafi's rule, newly married couples were entitled to 60,000 dinar to assist them in buying a home and to encourage and support new families. When a woman had a baby, she received the equivalent of $5,000 from the government. The Libyan government also financed 50% of the price when a Libyan citizen purchased a new car. Housing was an obstacle in Libya, there wasn't enough to meet the demands of the growing population. However, Gaddafi did his best to change this, vowing that he would not buy his own parents a home until every Libyan owned a home first. In addition to all of his people-based policies, Gaddafi was strongly opposed to the Israeli occupation of Palestine, and he was a proud anti-Zionist. For many years, Gaddafi attempted to unite the Arab nations to rise up against the Israelis. On many occasions, Gaddafi sent Libyan troops to help the Palestinian people to fight the Israeli forces. He was very passionate about the freedom of his Arab brothers and sisters.
Colonel, you've been described as many things. A terrorist, as a butcher, I think, as a gangster, and as a madman. Why are you described in all those ways?
At the beginning, it is Zionist propaganda against me because I support firmly and strongly and permanently the Palestinian resistance.
Right now, he's obsessed with the Lebanon. His call for an Arab summit has been largely ignored. So where does that leave Gaddafi, who sees himself as the one leader who can unite the Arab world against Israel?
Is it possible that the PLO will be wiped out in Lebanon by the time there is an Arab summit?
No. No, it is not possible.
While some of Gaddafi's methods may have been portrayed as harsh or unjust, to some resembling that of a dictatorship, he was a fine example of the well-known saying, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter." The evidence of the many good things that Gaddafi did do for the welfare of his people far outweighed the bad, especially when looking at the big picture of what he was trying to accomplish.
Why do we think that you have changed?
العالم هو اللي تغير.
But is there anything in particular that prompted you to go from a person who was at one point regarded as a dangerous person?
طبعا أنا قايم بثورة عندها طروحات عالمية وساهمت في حركات التحرير مساهمة فعالة، والدولة المستعمرة لا تريد هذا طبعا، عشان كذا صوروني بهذه الصورة. أنا يعني مبادئي ما تغيرتش عنها.
So when many people throughout the Western world in particular regarded you as a sponsor of terrorism, is that no longer the case?
طبعا الغرب يعتبر حركات التحرير حركات إرهاب، عشان كذا بيتهموني بإني أيد الإرهاب لأني أنا بنأيد حركة التحرر.
Deciphering facts from fiction when it comes to Gaddafi can be difficult, as there wasn't much positive media coverage released about him. However, it is important to recognize that the same group of individuals that control the Western world governments, the British monarchy, the UN, NATO, the CIA, and other three-letter agencies, also run the banks and the mainstream media platforms, and have been well documented to instigate and then profit from war. It should also be noted that they are all connected to, run, or owned by Zionist Jews. Over the 4 decades of Gaddafi's rule, towards the end, he began to lose favor with some of the people of Libya as well as the surrounding countries. This was due to international interference and involvement to bring him down. On the 20th of October 2011, Gaddafi was captured, tortured, and then assassinated by rebel forces. It is well documented that there was an international effort to destroy Gaddafi, and that the CIA, NATO, the UN, and the Obama administration played their part, orchestrating and assisting the rebels to bring Gaddafi down. Gaddafi's death sent Libya further into a downward spiral of division, disarray, and destruction, of which it has never recovered.